So there have been some big free agent signings this past offseason that so far have not panned out from a production standpoint. And in today's video, I want to talk about some of the worst ones I've seen right after we look at some of the biggest injuries from around the league. Okay, before we get into some of the quote-unquote worst free agent signings so far based on how they've performed through 3 weeks of the NFL season, I want to talk about some injuries from around the league. There are quite a bit here. The Eagles have been without A.J. Brown for the past couple of weeks due to a hamstring injury he suffered in practice before week 2, and it looks like he's going to miss the Eagles' week 4 game against the Bucs as well after he sat out of practice today. It makes sense considering they have a week 5 bye, and soft tissue injuries are nothing to mess around with. So giving him a couple more weeks to heal up is probably best for him at this point. With that said, the Eagles are going to be extra thin at receiver this week because Devontae Smith also didn't practice today after getting a concussion last week on a pretty gnarly hit against the Saints. On top of that, Britton Covey, it just keeps going here for the Eagles. Britton Covey reportedly suffered a broken scapula, aka a broken shoulder blade, and he's expected to be out for around 6 weeks. That means Philly is going to be relying heavily on Jahan Dotson this week, who they acquired from the Commanders before the start of the season. So he hasn't even been there very long as it is. They're out 3 of their receivers, and tight end Dallas Goedert may have to carry these guys. He's coming off a monster game and wouldn't be surprised if he leads the team in targets again this week. In some running back news, Dan Quinn confirmed today that Austin Eckler will miss this week's game against the Cardinals after suffering a concussion last week in that Bengals victory. A banger of a game, if I do say so myself. Then this is exciting for Panthers fans if excitement exists in their realm right now, but second-round rookie running back Jonathan Brooks is reportedly in the final stages of his recovery process as he's been healing up his ACL that was torn last November during his final year at Texas. He was on the PUP list to start the year and was required to sit out the first 4 games, but he has a real shot to suit up, I believe, around week 5 against the Bears. Some unfortunate news, though, for Panthers fans is that wide receiver Adam Thielen is headed to IR after injuring his hamstring in their week 3 win over the Raiders. I believe it was on this incredible touchdown pass of his that he caught. It was a crazy play, but it is unfortunate that he's going to be missing at least the next 4 games because of it. All right, let's talk O-line injuries because Saints center Erik McCoy is reportedly undergoing groin surgery and is set to miss around 6 to 8 weeks as he heals up. It's a tough loss for New Orleans as McCoy was coming off his first Pro Bowl season last year and is one of the key pieces along that O-line. Next up, the 0-3 Bengals are off to a nightmare start to their 2024 season, to say the least, and to add injury to insult, right tackle Trent Brown tore the patellar tendon in his knee and is undergoing season-ending surgery. All right, now this one is a pretty crazy story. Broncos linebacker Alex Singleton reportedly tore his ACL in the Broncos' win over the Bucs last week, yet played most of the game on it and actually led the team in tackles. That's insane. The injury occurred on the 8th defensive snap of the game, yet he played all 57 snaps and finished with 10 tackles. It's obviously a tough loss for the Broncos, but I just thought that this story was pretty bonkers and worth mentioning to you all. Now, before we get into the free agent quote-unquote busts, we have 2 quarterbacks whose week 4 statuses are a bit up in the air right now. Jordan Love, who's missed the last 2 weeks with an MCL sprain, may be nearing a return this week against the Minnesota Vikings. He was a limited participant both yesterday and today, but said he's feeling better than he was last week. It seems like both Love and the Packers are keeping their cards pretty close to the vest in terms of whether or not he'll actually play, which forces the Vikings to plan for both the possibility of facing either Jordan Love or Malik Willis, which is kind of completely different game plans. As for Justin Herbert, he re-aggravated that high ankle sprain last week and actually left the game and was placed in a walking boot. Things did not look good, and it appeared like he could miss an extended amount of time, but he actually participated in a limited fashion during the Chargers practice yesterday, telling the media, quote, "It's better than where we were last week. I think it's progressing. It was just really painful during the game. The buildup from the hits, the toll on it. But I think at this point, I've done a good job of rehabbing it, of getting treatment on it. I think we're taking steps forward." So it sounds like he may not miss any time after all. We'll see. I mean, that's good news for the Chargers. You're taking on the Chiefs, an AFC West opponent that is 3-0. The Chargers are 2-1, and you really don't want to go 2-2 if you're the Chargers. Now, this could be a little gamesmanship as well here and making things seem like Herbert plays and he actually will not. or he could actually be good to go. I know he really wants to play in this game, so we'll see how things play out as we get closer to Sunday. All right, let's move on from injuries to the main topic at hand. Every year, teams shuffle around their rosters like crazy between the draft, of course, and also free agency. And while it's still very early on in the season, I want to take a look at some of the quote-unquote worst free agent signings of this past offseason based on things like performance, the size of their contract, and a couple other factors. The first one I want to talk about is Gabe Davis. The Jags signed the former Bills wideout to a 3-year, $39 million deal that's worth up to $50 million this past offseason in hopes that he would help fill the void that Calvin Ridley left after he signed with the Titans. Well, through 3 games, Davis only has 8 catches on 16 targets, which is not a good catch rate, and I know some of that has to do with Trevor Lawrence and the team as a whole playing pretty awful football right now, but it's still not great. It's not a great look on Gabe Davis. And on those 8 catches, he has 123 yards and 0 touchdowns. He's actually 4th on the team in receptions right now behind Brian Thomas Jr., Christian Kirk, and Travis Etienne. And what's crazy is he actually leads the receiving room in snaps with 161. Christian Kirk is second with 143. Now, the good news for Jacksonville is it looks like they hit on their first-round pick in Brian Thomas Jr. He leads the team in targets, receptions, yards per catch, and has their longest reception of the season. So that's a silver lining, but the Jags are paying a pretty hefty price for a third receiver in Gabe Davis, though of course this could improve as the season goes on. Now let's stick with the Jags here for a sec, because not only are they seemingly overpaying for Gabe Davis, but they're also overpaying for defensive end Arik Armstead. At least that's how things seem early on this season. The Jags gave him a 3-year, $43.5 million contract in hopes of him bolstering up their D-line. The issue is they knew he was coming off a meniscus surgery after last season. He was taken off the PUP list and cleared to play mid-August, so injuries have to be impacting a definite part here in his production and at least how it's looked so far. He has 1 sack on the year, but he only has 2 solo tackles and a PFF grade of 57.7, which is 74th out of 114 defensive ends in the league. On top of that, he's nearly 30 years old and he turns 31 in a couple of months. He's not a bad player by any means, but the price they're paying right now for the output they're getting in return simply does not match. He's the 7th highest paid player on the entire roster, yet he's played just 44% of the snaps on defense, which is 10th among all defensive players on their team. And there's a reason why teams stay bad: poor coaching, poor QB play, and poor front office management. And it seems like the Jags are 3 for 3 right now, though we will see how Arik Armstead looks as the season progresses, and he's even further removed from injury and surgery and all that. Enough of that team, though, because the next player I want to talk about is wide receiver Curtis Samuel. The Bills traded away Stephon Diggs to the Texans, eating a crap ton of dead money to do so, and they also lost the aforementioned Gabe Davis in free agency. That left a pretty big hole in their roster, specifically in the wide receiver room, even after drafting Keon Coleman. Well, Buffalo went out and signed Curtis Samuel to a 3-year, $24 million contract, which definitely didn't break the bank, but $8 million per year would signify that they intended on using him quite a bit, right? Well, that's what's so strange about this signing, because so far through 3 weeks, Curtis Samuel has seen the field fewer than any other receiver. In fact, Mac Hollins, who they signed to a dirt cheap 1-year deal, actually leads the room in snaps. Then it's Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, MVS, who they signed to a 1-year deal as well, and finally Curtis Samuel. It's hard to say he's even playing poorly. I mean, he's 4th in receptions despite hardly seeing the field, but the whole situation's a bit weird for a team named the Bills. They're throwing a lot of them out the window by not playing this man. It is worth mentioning as well, kind of like Arik Armstead, different situation, but there's a potential injury involved here. He was dealing with a turf toe injury in August, and those can linger on. However, when Bills head coach Sean McKnight was asked about this, the toe injury being a cause to the leading lack of production, McDermott didn't really even mention the injury and said they were just going with the flow of the game. That was a couple weeks ago, but he's also been off the injury report since week 1. I have no idea if the injury is still playing a role. Maybe not. Even during week 1 and him being on the injury report, he was a full participant all week long. Either way, Samuel is currently not producing for the team at a high level for whatever reason. Next up is running back DeAndre Swift. He inked a 3-year, $24 million deal with the Bears this offseason. With Chicago looking to add a more dynamic player out of the backfield, he was coming off a career year with the Eagles where he ran for over 1,000 yards and 5 tutties and caught 39 passes and a receiving touchdown as well. The contract the Bears gave him, by the way, made him the 8th highest paid running back in the league, but he is far from a top 8 running back at this point in the season. Listen to this. Through 3 games, he has 37 carries for 68 yards. That is 1.8 yards per carry, not great to say the least, and it's so bad, according to Jeremy Fowler, the Bears are planning on giving Rashawn Johnson an extended look this week against the Rams, and we don't know exactly how they plan to split up their snaps and carries, but the fact that they're already bailing or seeming to try other options than DeAndre Swift as the workhorse just 3 weeks into the season is not a good sign. Now, to be clear, the Bears are a freaking train wreck right now. The O-line is not playing great football, and they have like the 22nd worst run blocking grade in the entire league per PFF. So it's not like this is doing DeAndre Swift any favors, but they also have running backs that are producing at a bit higher level than DeAndre Swift at the moment. And with that, there's a few guys that inked decent deals this past offseason and are yet to deliver. Let me know your thoughts on these guys and maybe even some guys that you think I missed in the comments down below. Maybe we'll talk about them in a future video. And with that, I'll see y'all next time.